All right, well, good morning and welcome to the France Symposium 2018. It's great to be here, to see many familiar faces and to meet new people. This is I think we're returning to the Shangri-La after a few years away, and it's one of my favorite venues for the Life Ray events worldwide. And I hope you enjoy it as well. This morning I wanted to talk to you about some of the things that LifeRay has been thinking about as we ourselves evolve as a company and as we think differently about the role that we have to play in the digital transformation that you and all of us are experiencing in the companies and organizations we work for. I'm probably going to make some obvious points, but I hope that I can apply them in meaningful ways to our context as a LifeRay ecosystem. So this gentleman is the EVP and COO of SAS Institute. I actually don't remember his name, but he was famous for saying that data is the fuel and analytics the engine of the new economy. And when I first saw this quote and I saw his photo, I thought, this is exactly the kind of man who's probably paid to make very large statements like this. And you might be thinking the same thing about me standing on this stage. And I say this to recognize that the concept of big data and analytics, data mining, machine learning, all of these things have been sort of the next wave of buzzwords that all of us probably heard. Maybe some of us are experts. But I think it's meaningful and useful for us to consider these ideas and to think about how they might change the way we do business. I was trying to think of a personal example, and at the risk of your misunderstanding my personal character flaws, I was in Germany over the weekend, and I happened to be near a shop that was selling all kinds of alcohol, and I walked in just to see. I'm not a big whiskey drinker, but I did see that they had this Japanese whiskey called Hibiki on sale. And some of my friends back in Los Angeles are whiskey connoisseurs, and they had mentioned to me that some of these are very difficult to find. And so I quickly whipped out my phone, and I looked up, and I saw the first article said that the Suntory distillery is discontinuing these whiskeys. And so then I looked at the prices and I saw that the going online price was 3 to 5 times more than what this small shop in Germany was asking for. So I quietly brought out my credit card and I purchased the bottle, and we'll see what happens from here. But this idea that data is helping us make more intelligent decisions, I think, is really permeating every aspect of our culture. And just in case you guys don't know anything about this whiskey, you may remember this famous scene from Lost in Translation. Now, we are all in business, and many of us are in the larger enterprise business, and so sort of the effects of data on consumer behavior is interesting, but we also probably want to think about how data can help us do our work better. And a lot of the conversation around big data has been around big data. One of the most fascinating examples I came across was an American engine manufacturer called Pratt & Whitney. They underwent a significant data and intelligence initiative. And the interesting thing about their case is that they started off with a different intent. And so at first they were really trying to operationalize their maintenance. When were engines failing? How many hours had they been flying when they needed to go in for repair? This is of course something very costly for them, but also costly for the aircraft, for the airlines, because every day or hour that a plane is out of service, it means that they're not flying and making revenue, taking passengers. Well, it was in the course of doing this other activity of trying to predict engine repair costs, that they realized that they could also just throw in there a bunch of sensors to collect real-time information during the operation of the aircraft. And they were actually doing this every second. Now you can imagine just how much data that was generating, but they also found that by digging into that data, they found really valuable information about fuel consumption and the actual usage of the engine. And out of this came sort of a different way of thinking about their business, where they no longer thought of themselves only as selling aircraft engines, but also basically offering a certain guarantee around the number of flight hours and a certain level of fuel efficiency to the airline manufacturer, to the airlines, which is ultimately what they want to provide a better customer experience to their passengers. Now, I've shown you two very extreme examples, one on the individual customer side and one at the very big data level. But I think there are a lot of applications for us throughout that spectrum in the middle. And I think just to help us think about this, we might take the example of Moneyball, which was a book written about 15 years ago about how this gentleman, Billy Beane, as manager of the Oakland A's, really revolutionized the way that they did scouting for baseball teams. This was something that was done very, very traditionally. There was sort of an old school way of thinking when it came to identifying talent. It had to do with statistics, but it also went with gut feeling. And Billy Beane was able to change, to turn this whole thing on its head, by basically showing that getting on base and hitting percentage were more important than some of the traditional statistics. And the way that he did this was by looking through the data, working with statisticians and mathematicians, and then playing out his theory in the market. And the beautiful thing about this story is that he was able, with a $45 million budget, to outclass and outpace the Yankees, who were spending, I believe, about $125 million a year on their salaries. So I think that's all a story that we would like to have in our organizations. How do we get there? Well, there are three main things that Liferay have been thinking about. Many of you are technologists, and so I hope these are also welcome developments as technicians working with Liferay. But for those of you on the business side, I think there are applications also. And the first is simply to design for data-driven intelligence. It's been in vogue for many years to talk about iterative development. People have said that it's not enough just to build a solution, but you should actually deploy it, get it in front of users, and then get some feedback and evolve, right? And I think one thing that Liferay has lacked for many years is that we weren't even thinking so much about this. We expressed our value proposition, even to you in this room, probably with something like this slide, where we said, let's have a single platform for the whole enterprise where you build all of your customer, partner, and employee-facing experiences. We weren't really thinking about what would happen after you launched that new intranet or that new website or that new customer portal. There was a sense that it was enough for us to have thought about some of the considerations around your infrastructure, app server compatibility, database compatibility, to make it as quick as possible for you to get that solution up and running, and then make sure that we had options for how you're going to support that long term. The other thing, though, about the agile feedback model is that we're still primarily talking about just building the solution, right? As developers, as solution architects, we're really thinking about, let's get this intranet or this website off the ground and get it out there in production. And in 2018, one of the things we need to do as we consider how to build intelligent solutions is to include, from the beginning, a design for how we're going to collect and process data to derive insight. So of course this means the aggregation of data, typically in what people are calling a data lake, but it also means hiring talent or finding partners, outsourcing, to take that data and figure out where the patterns are, to develop models, whether it's just simple machine learning or deep learning. These are the kinds of things that we have to do right from the outset of the project. We've been thinking at Liferay in many ways about how to apply these principles, and one area is digital workplace. I think nearly 45% of our customers are using Liferay for an intranet solution, and I believe a high proportion, especially here in France, of our customers are using Liferay as an intranet. And as people have now been talking more about digital workplace, I think it's appropriate for us to see how we can apply these principles to employee knowledge management and engagement. So here are some of the things that we've been thinking about. When you search Google these days for certain topics, you'll find that if it's on the esoteric site, it's going to do its primary function, which is to be a search engine. Google started by going out and crawling web pages and basically finding the most relevant results for you. But one thing that Google has been doing for a couple of years now is it's actually brokering several sources of information and essentially giving an opinion as to what it thinks is the best answer to the question that you're asking. So when I search for Zinedine Zidane, who is a public figure, they actually aggregate entries from Wikipedia, photos from the internet, latest news, brings it all together. Of course, it also does auto-completion on your search results, and even still, many, many years after, one of the top results is Headbutt. So, interesting. When, as a Liferay community, you search for questions like, how do I cluster Liferay? You may first start out by looking at our clustering and high availability white paper. And it's going to give you some general information there. It's going to give you sort of a start, but you probably have some specific details in your configuration that is not answered by this white paper. So you go to the Liferay community, you find some old blogs that were written by Liferay community members, starting to round out your understanding. And then finally, you may actually go to the forums and post a question. Hopefully, you've done some of your research and you're really just asking for clarification. So the answer to the question, how do I cluster Liferay, might seem really straightforward. But the reality is that the answer lies somewhere in between all of these assets that exist. Now, in your organization, this may look different, but essentially, a lot of your employees are interacting with assets, and by doing so, by either spending a lot of time with them, spending less time with them, by forwarding and sharing it to colleagues, or by developing trust with the author of certain assets and not others, they're essentially giving you as an organization information about what is the true knowledge and what's inherently trustable and what should be then promoted within the organization. So over time, where we see data and intelligence coming into the digital workplace is we're going to be able to answer questions like, which are the assets that carry the most authority depending on their topics? What is the nature of the social networks? So when you have a question in your organization, is there one go-to person that people repeatedly turn to get what they believe is the real answer to a question? And then finally, as your employees interact with maybe even formal training, are there certain ones where when you measure the impact over time to their credibility among their peers, that some of those training courses are much, much more effective than the others? One of the things you're also going to hear about today from Liferay is that we are planning to launch a commerce solution this year. And we've been taking this data-driven intelligence approach also to how we've designed our commerce solution. One of the places that we're focusing is the mid-enterprise space. It does work with B2C, but we've also taken into consideration some of the specific requirements of B2B. And in B2B, one of the things that you want to do is you want to reduce the amount of time that inventory is sitting in warehouses, both for the actual manufacturer and for their distributors. Over time, these distributors, resellers, they are placing orders with the manufacturer. This is then carried down the stream to the end customers and the retailers. And there are things like changes in weather or changes in political climates that can affect the amount of orders that come through. But it can also be a predictable rhythm where over time you can sense the patterns. What is the perfect amount of inventory you should order ahead of time so that you have it in stock when the end customers want it, but you're not carrying more than you need. And so later on I'm going to try to show you some of that in a demo, but here you can see that on an individual product level, we are providing forecasting for this optimization of inventory. And to do this, we are using machine learning. Okay, so the other thing I want to say about this topic, just to close, is that not all data has to be big. There are cases for small data, and the reason why, I guess the reason why big data has become such a hype is because when you do have more data, it is easier in a sense to detect those patterns and to derive that intelligence that everyone has been talking about these days. But you can also do it with smaller amounts of data. There are caveats, of course. The quality of the data matters a lot. You want to probably have simpler algorithms, simpler models so that you don't get too much false correlation. You also really want to watch out for outliers, which have a big impact on those models. So there are tons of people having this conversation about small data, but I bring this up because in the context of a intranet or a B2B partner portal, the kinds of ways that Liferay is being used, there are going to be a lot of times you don't need big data per se, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be thinking about how to derive that intelligence from your data. Okay, just as a final example, another product that we will be releasing this year is our Analytics Cloud. And one of the things that we're able to do now with Analytics Cloud is to have out-of-the-box solution for doing analytics on your Liferay assets, blogs, web content, but also on the pages of your site themselves. And even on Liferay's own website, the kind of volume that we're seeing on blogs here, this is actual real data from Liferay.com, 526 visitors. So again, it's not a huge data set, but by looking at what people are doing on this blog, we're able to understand what people are interested in, and we're hoping then to take this into actionable results. Okay, so we're designing for intelligence. We're also designing for heterogeneity. And this is as much a lesson for Liferay as I think it's something that you've already been doing for a very long time. Going back again to our value proposition, the big blue boxes, in this mindset or this worldview that we had, we honestly believed that every enterprise was going to rip and replace every other technology out, use Liferay, and we were going to essentially be the best platform for building every solution on the planet. And we realize, of course, that that is not anything that we can do, nor should we really have that ambition. We continue to see, and now we believe that best-in-class solutions really are the way to go. And we would say that as much as Liferay is not that be-all, end-all solution, neither should you consider our competitors. You really should be looking at the relative strengths of each platform. So we're changing our architecture diagram, we're changing our value proposition. We really see that Liferay needs to be, and we want to be, a platform that works well in heterogeneous environments. In a very concrete sense, that means playing nicely with some of the popular front-end frameworks like Node.js and Angular. I remember actually upstairs about 4 years ago, one of our partners at our partner conference saying, you know, my developers these days, they don't want to use Liferay anymore. They want to do the cool stuff. They want to do front end. They want everything to be easy and fast. And we realize and recognize that. And we believe that there's still a lot of value in Liferay and the huge library of backend services and application functionalities we have. So now we're not thinking, how can we make Liferay development more attractive for those front-end developers? We're looking at how can we make it so that you can front-end your application in something like Angular or Node, and then just access Liferay services through a well-written API. There's a lot of work that we're doing on that. If you were here yesterday, you heard Daniel Reuter share a little bit about APO and our Hypermedia APIs that we've been developing. In fact, one of our biggest customer stories from the US, Spire Energy, this was the result of a consolidation of 4 different natural gas companies in the US. They have about 1.3 million customers, I believe, and they needed to do a lot of heavy integration on the back end with SAP and Oracle. They needed to do things like fulfilling payments, but they wanted to have a great unified experience. And they actually used Angular on the front end of this, and it worked out really well. For our analytics, one of the things that we decided to do was to make sure that it didn't just work with Liferay. So when you use Liferay Analytics Cloud, you can actually add the tracking functionality onto all of the different sites that you have across your enterprise. And there are reasons for doing this, but the main one that we see is that we want the value of Liferay ultimately to be that we understand your customers and the relationship that they have with you. And that relationship is going to play out across a lot of different experiences, and not all of them are going to be built on Liferay. And so as we shift our value proposition away from just being a platform for building sites to one that understands your customer relationship long term, we believe that this heterogeneous approach makes a lot of sense. We also wanted to address some of the complaints and concerns that you've had as customers, where you said, you know, we enjoy Liferay, we like the value that it provides, but sometimes it's really hard to find resources. Sometimes the complexity of things like OSGI seems to slow developers down. And so we want to offer more of these options so that you can save the OSGI stuff for when you need it, you know, customizing our services, but really do the bulk of your development in these very mainstream technologies that have been accepted by the marketplace. And then finally, one of the things that we're learning to do as Liferay, and I hope that all of us are doing as well, is to embrace the cloud. We've gotten a lot of customer feedback about this. A lot of it is more on the infrastructure and deployment level, wanting to use Liferay with platforms like OpenShift, asking for the official Docker containers from Liferay, maybe talking to us about their Elastic licensing and Elastic usage scenarios and how that does or doesn't work with what we currently offer. And then, of course, for the business folks, a lot of times it's really just, you know, we've got a great partner, we've built a solution, we don't want to have to deal with managing it, you guys manage it for us. And, you know, some of the partners in this room have already done a great job of offering that, which is awesome, but Liferay wants to do a better job of that as well. There's been a lot of trepidation and fear about the cloud. I know here in Europe, it's always a different story. But sometimes you need the cloud. Sometimes the cloud really is necessary for different capabilities. So we learned this lesson with our audience targeting function, which was built for 6.2, where we realized that for some customers, like we worked with Rite Aid, which is a pharmaceutical company in the US, B2C, they were getting so much activity on their website that it just wouldn't scale as an on-premise architecture. And so one of the solutions we proposed to them was to move the architecture to the cloud so they could handle the load. I drew this diagram with the digital workplace vision using this ambiguously shaped rounded rectangle at the top because, like I said, you don't have to use, you don't have to have big data for all of these cases, in which case you may not need the cloud. But certainly in a lot of cases, the cloud is going to be the best architecture for this, and you want to be open to this. As I've talked to customers and partners throughout the globe about the cloud, one thing that's come up is that it doesn't have to mean that you're giving all your data to Amazon or Microsoft. There are options. There are options for private cloud. There are options for geographically specific clouds. I was talking with Swisscom last week, and they were talking about the availability of the Swiss cloud where, and they actually advertise this, all your data remains in Switzerland. So don't be afraid of it. I'm sure many of you are already thinking about this, and Liferay is thinking about this too. So just to close, I wanted to show how these three principles, intelligence, heterogeneity, and the cloud are going to come together for what really is our ultimate goal. So embracing heterogeneous sites, it means that we're going to be removing the silos of our understanding. We're going to be understanding what people are doing and how our business is running across many different touch points. As we do that, we're going to be collecting data in various ways and with various technologies. But what's important is that you ultimately bring it together, and then once you've done that, you can then apply some of these intelligence, machine learning, and other principles to derive insight into how your business is running, to take action on that, and then ultimately improve the customer experience and improve the efficiency of the way you run your business. So putting it all into one picture, you can now see how we're evolving. We want to embrace these things and be a more credible and relevant technology for the modern problems that we are facing. Just to close, I wanted to say that one of the things that Liferay wants to do is ultimately what Billy Beane did with the Oakland A's. And there are a couple of quotes that I thought were relevant here. Any other team wins the World Series, good for them. They're drinking champagne, they get a ring. But if we win on our budget with this team, we'll have changed the game. And that's what I want. I want it to mean something. As a company, Liferay, we're open source. We ourselves are the underdogs. We're not nearly as big as Adobe and Salesforce. But we want to win, and we want to help you win. Many of you, I believe, are invested in us and our ecosystem for some of these same reasons. And I hope that with some of these changes in the way that we are designing and architecting our technology, we're going to be able to continue to do that together for many years to come. So thank you again for being here, and look forward to the conference.